You're listening in on an animated discussion about Superman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from the Cinematropolis.com. And today's topic is Blasts from the Past, Parts 1 and 2. Wow, Joshua, this is a really dumb name because there's also, firstly, Blasts from the Past. I'm so tempted to say Blasts from the Pasts, which makes no sense. That's one issue. The second issue is there's another episode in the DCAU that's just singular, Blast from the Past, which makes much more sense. So I have to find out who named this episode, and I want to smack them because it's just confusing and a tongue twister.
Well, I agree with you about the tongue twister. I kind of appreciate that it's more accurate. There are technically two blasts from the past, but now my inner grammar nerd, which I'm going to be honest, I don't feed very often. I mean, I am a writer, but I have editors for a reason. But my inner grammar nerd is now wondering, can blast be collective? I guess.
See, that's what I'm saying. Whether or not it's grammatically correct, and maybe it is, and if it is, kudos to them. But whether or not it's grammatically correct, it's still kind of vaguely confusing. But we all get the gist of it. I just think, good titles aren't vaguely confusing, but that's all right.
Yeah, and it is hard to say. And the fact that this may be more than we talk about any other single thing going on in this pair of episodes is possibly telling.
Joshua, Superman 2 is great. It's great. I love it.
Superman 2 is very good. I agree with you. Superman 2 is excellent.
Oh, wait, this wasn't Superman 2? I thought, oh, dang. They were so similar, I got them confused, but I thought we
You're not wrong.
I thought we were watching good one. Oh, my dang.
All right, listen, we're going to talk about these designs because two of the three I guess more like 50% will get into it. Number one, best new design in these episodes is not even a character, but it is finally a piece of technology on Superman the Animated Series that doesn't look like it was dashed off at 4:30 on a Friday so people could go to margarita time. And I speak to you of the Phantom Zone projector. I love it. But before I gush about why, I need to know, do you agree with me that this thing is amazing? Or are you wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I think it is amazing only because of how I think it looks kind of goofy, but goofy in the right kind of way. Like in the in the B-movie sci-fi kind of way. Like it's oversized. It has a really goofy thing on the top that I don't understand why it's there. And then they've got like the little lens that they can see into the Phantom Zone. They can look into like binoculars. I'm like, wow, this was definitely a design choice, not an efficiency choice. But you know what? I love it. Let's roll with it. I think it looks cool.
That's all the stuff I love about it. I love that it looks a little silly because I always want Krypton to look a little bit like what 1955 thought the future would look like, Just a lot of like togas and robes and other just stuff floats. And look, here's a thing that looks like an antenna with concentric rings around it and whatever. That's what I love about the Phantom Zone projector. I feel like clearly in the DC extended universe of the movies, the Phantom Zone projector would just look like a super scary, sinister gun, which is 1,000% the wrong approach. This actually looks like a projector of some kind. I love it. And when you look into the viewer, they're living in a sea of Kirby crackle. I love this. It is wonderful. And the fact that it not only is wonderful on its own merits, but just blows away literally every single piece of technology we've seen on this show, including the ones we liked, is just, this is what it all should be, man. This is what it should be.
So Joshua, does this retroactively change your mind about the Kal-El's ship? Because technically it was inside the ship. So
no, not at all, because that ship still looks terrible. That ship still looks boring. It doesn't look like it came from the same place as this Phantom Zone projector, honestly.
Oh, no, this Phantom Zone projector was definitely from an exotic scientist, whereas that was built more by, I don't know, someone who was trying to get out of work on 5 o'clock on a Friday.
Exactly. Okay, I have then one kind of negative thing to say, and then we can talk about our actual main antagonists. But I want to mention the design of the Kryptonian soldiers that we see in in the flashback, they're really bad. Like, it's really extremely boring. They don't look very Kryptonian, and they don't really look very soldiery. Like, I don't understand it. It goes right back to the combination of the Superman design problems, which is background characters are given no love and technology is largely given no love. Do you disagree with me at all? Am I wrong?
Well, Joshua, besides the fact that I had to actually look up this design when I saw that it was in the notes, should tell you everything you need to know, which is that I found them very forgettable, like extremely forgettable, like most of this episode. I just, it definitely just like, man, I'm sounding extra harsh, but I'm not a fan of this episode, as you can tell. It just feels very phoned in and milquetoast or ham sandwich, if you will. You're not going to remember it.
No, you're right. You're right. And I think that we see that. And I think that we see this juxtaposition of like a couple of really great ideas in this episode that just sort of get subsumed into bigger, more mediocre ideas. And I think we see that in Jaxer and Mala, okay? And I'm not even going to talk about them when they're in their military uniforms because they look just as boring as everybody else. But I am actually a huge fan of what I am jokingly referring to as their prison blues.
They're prison blues. Yes.
The outfits that they wear through most of this episode are really good. Like, they feel more Kryptonian. They feel more science fiction-y while also being uniform, right? Like, this is not your special cool outfit that you get to go out and do superhero stuff in. This is the stuff we put you in jail in. This is Krypton's jumpsuit. And I love it. I love it.
I love exactly one thing about both of their designs. The blue's fine. The outfits are fine. The thing I actually love in the design is just Jaxer's eye patch, okay? I just think it's kind of neat. It looks different than most other eye patches. It looks future-y. It gives him something that's worth remembering, which I think's about all I can say for the character.
Otherwise does not exist. You're right. God, you're right.
And again, you can disagree. You and I can disagree. It's okay. I found Mala to be... and it wasn't just the design. Something about... Like, I don't feel like... It's going to sound terrible. I hope this doesn't sound as bad as I'm thinking it might. Like, I didn't think I thought Mala's face looked very strange, like strange enough that I was in like Uncanny Valley a bunch of the time on an animated program where I was like, wait, what am I looking at? And it didn't seem like it was necessarily consistent. Like, sometimes the lips were a lot bigger than smaller. And I know this is an animated program, so it sounds nitpicky. But for some reason, I was like, she just doesn't seem consistent. Maybe it's my imagination. And I don't want to be harsher on the design of our female characters more than our male characters, because I think Jaxer outside the eye patch is also pretty forgettable, but I felt like at least he was consistent. This might be my take, Joshua. You can totally disagree, but I didn't find either of them to be particularly striking, but Mala in particular, I just was like, what is going on with her get up here? Okay, that's just my take.
You make an excellent point about how off-model Mala's facial features are throughout this episode. Let me hit the one upshot of Jaxer, because you're right, the eye patch is pretty cool. I think I was distracted by the fact that I feel like our villains often having some kind of disability has not aged particularly well into 2020, which is not really the fault of this episode, because this is a superhero story problem going back very, very, very far. So I'm not going to hold this episode to some kind of crazy high standard, but I am going to be like, I don't like the eye patch because of that reason. Like, why do all of our villains have to be physically disabled? That is very ableist. It's got to be rough on our disabled viewers and fans, you know? So, but you're right about the actual eye patch itself. If I can get over the ableism of it, it's pretty cool.
Joshua, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I had not even considered that. It was more of, in my mind, just a striking visual feature that really stuck out. But that is a good note. I am going to take that and keep that note in mind for the future, because that's something I hadn't really considered in superhero fiction before. So great observation about the eye patch. I think that's really important.
I think it's a thing that's really on my mind right now, because on my MCU podcast, Listen Up A-Holes, we're covering a lot of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a complicated show to talk about, because it's got real highs for quality and real lows for quality. But one thing that it's not great at is its disability representation and its representation for people of color who are not in the main cast. So that disability side is just really on my mind because of that coverage. So again, it's not this episode's fault. It's just a thing that I tripped over because I've changed since the first time that I saw this. Similarly, I agree with you that Mala's off-model face is very off-putting. But overall, like if we can talk about the whole package, I'm a really big fan of it because I feel like once you get her out of the Kryptonian outfit, she's undeniably feminine, right? She has this long hair, which is white, and I think is really striking. And her eye makeup game is on point. That's one thing that actually stays consistent throughout all the drawings of her face. And it really works for her because she's also a very big, physically imposing presence, right?
Oh, terrifying. Terrifying.
Yeah, there's not a lot of variation among feminine shapes in the DCAU. There just isn't. And I think it's interesting that Mala still manages to come across as feminine while also obviously being bulkier than any woman we have seen on this, New Batman Adventures, or BTAS ever before. I love that part of it.
That is another great observation. She is, I think that's what makes her, the body build is certainly unique and sticks out, even amongst the male characters, I would say. It's not like she's not just, it's not like they're putting a female feminine face on a male character design. So
yeah,
in that sense, I think, kudos to them for not phoning it in on that front. So good note. Yeah.
And that is all of our new designs. So let's talk about these episodes. I think we've probably tipped our hands a little bit that we feel like this is very much in the Superman and Batman animated series tradition of doing two-parters that probably could have been 1 1/3 parters.
I think that this episode, Joshua, as you've said several times, at best, it's 1.25 episodes because there are ideas
It's really
here.
true.
There are clear ideas that they want to put out there and put in the fiction and use to test Superman with. And I think that's great. I think the idea that Superman's willingness to, I should say, maybe his optimism, blind optimism and hope for other people allows him to see past who is basically in bed with a dictator, essentially saying, you know what?
Yeah,
that's okay. Yeah. And I think he didn't fully realize that relationship, of course, but also when you go back and watch the flashback in which he kind of sees them in the past, she is clearly not quite like, she seems pretty obviously his right hand. So right. I think that's an idea. Okay, Superman has this unshakable belief in the best of people, and that she's long over served her sentence, and which in his mind is like, that's not right. This was not the sentence passed.
Yeah,
got to let her out.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great. That's a great idea. And they follow the idea for about 3 to 5 minutes. Like, it's not very long. It's not very long at all before he realizes, oh wait, she actually is kind of evil. We got to put her back. So that's. They stretch that out. I don't really think there's a lot of interesting things they do with it. And then, of course, they bring in Jax-Ur in part 2. And the idea that Kal-El's... it's another one of those... Kal-El is cleaning up the sins of the father, Jor-El. This is an arch nemesis of Jor-El, and Superman's left dealing with it. And I think that's kind of a cool idea. But I just didn't think it really added anything we hadn't seen before. As I made the joke about Superman 2 earlier... This feels, I don't even want to say a Superman 2 light. Like, the storyline conceptually is ripped straight from Superman 2. Instead of Zod, they just changed Zod for Jax-Ur and even gave Jax-Ur a lot of Zod's tendencies and characteristics.
Yeah.
So it didn't really add anything new. So I'm like, well, why wouldn't I just go watch Superman 2? I don't know. And I know this is designed more for children, but it honestly feels like they needed some episodes. They had 2 episodes to fill, and they're like, what's the quickest way we can do that? And I just don't think it really services Superman or either of those characters very well.
I think that there are some things that wind up being really interesting as far as Superman's connection to Krypton in these 2 episodes. But otherwise, I'm pretty with you. I'm kind of imagining a world where they kept Mala's backstory the same, that she was Jax-Ur's second in command, but then they either do all of this in 1 episode or they take 2 episodes to really drill down on Mala, because I think it could have been really interesting to look at this as Mala comes out of the Phantom Zone. She says, I'll do whatever you want. We're the last two survivors. Tell me what our new ethos is. And Superman tells her, and she tries, but she, at first, I think, looks like culture shock. Just imagine if what first it is, instead of despotism, is culture shock. Like, she is acting like a cop. Not to open a can of worms, but just, go with me. She's acting like a cop or an authoritarian. And Superman has to spend the entire first episode going, not like that, not like that, like trying to teach her a better way. And it's not until the end of that first episode that we have the big reveal that it's like, no, I was 100% on Jax-Ur's side, and I am also a despot. And then the second episode without Jax-Ur gets to be about Mala showing her true colors and Superman's disappointment in that, his disillusionment with a piece of his own personal history. Like, you don't have to change anything. All the fights stay the same, right? Like, all the action set pieces stay the same, but you get to flip the script on a lot of other Superman stories by letting the antagonist stay only a woman the entire time. And we get to look at this idea of weaponized nostalgia, which is a real problem in the year of our Lord 2020.
Right. And the thing is, you laid it out perfectly. I think the real interesting aspect and angle there is wrestling with your past, wrestling with the nostalgia, understanding that your father made mistakes, understanding that your father also did some right things, that it's complicated.
Sure, yeah.
Your heritage is complicated.
Yes.
And I think that is a fundamentally interesting idea, especially for Superman. And I think it also that disillusionment could have been handled much more effectively and more meaningfully. That could have been like a battle scar that he took with him into future episodes.
Yes.
Whereas here it just feels like he sort of washes his hands of it and says, all right, well, we're done. Like, I don't feel like Superman really learned anything, even though I think the idea that he puts all this hope in another Kryptonian who then lets him down tremendously is a great lesson for him to learn. And maybe that's what they were going for here, but I didn't feel like they landed the plane, at least in an emotionally satisfying way.
No, I agree. Can you imagine? Now, I don't want to be spoilery, but we are going to be introduced to a character later that would just be a spectacular counterpoint to Mala in this. And this is the spoiler that I'm willing to put out there because the cartoon's been out for, 25 years at this point. We're going to get a version of Supergirl, right? Who does largely fulfill the ideals of Superman as Supergirl. And can you imagine the counterpoint with Mala if they had really gone hard for Mala being, part of that disillusionment? And I also agree with you, when we end the episode, we end it with Superman basically saying, well, I guess we're all better off without Krypton. And honestly, he's right. But he is right. Kryptonians are always the worst. The worst.
You're right, but shouldn't he be sad about that? Shouldn't he be upset?
It should break his heart. It should break his heart to know that his people would be terrible if they were still around. That he would be terrible if he had grown up there. Like, that should be a huge deal for him, and it just isn't. So it really hurts me in a way that he lands on a really accurate thought about Krypton. And I mean that both in fiction, because Kryptonians are kind of terrible most of the time, and metafictionally. Krypton is just an excuse for Superman to do a bunch of wild stuff on Earth, and, I will say, and also be a source of ancient wonders and dangers, kind of like in a fairy tale way. Like, I'm fine with that, which they do here, but you know what I'm saying. Like, that's what Krypton should be. We shouldn't be worried about what Krypton was, except in as much as we realize that Superman could be Superman if he'd stayed there. But that should hurt him more than it hurts us, and it doesn't seem to hurt him at all, and it's a real missed opportunity. And don't tell me that all of that is way too much for a children's cartoon from these creators, because you and I talked about many, many, many extremely poignant and serious and real episodes of Batman the Animated Series. We just talked about one in Growing Pains on New Batman Adventures, which I honestly think has significantly less mature storytelling than Batman the Animated Series did. As interesting as the concept of this episode is, it winds up being very lackluster. The fight scenes have a couple of interesting bits, but then most of the fight scene is very boring. it should have this big emotional punch, and it just doesn't. Mala is so much more interesting than Jax-Ur, but we have to spend an entire episode caring about Jax-Ur. They're not bad episodes, but I think this is another example of me being more upset with missed opportunities than actual mishandling, if that makes sense.
I would say that is accurate, because if I remove all of my knowledge about the things they pulled straight from, which feels like a very lazy decision, if I remove all of that baggage and I just look at the form, I think this is a very okay episode. Right.
Yes.
But it's only
rock
okay
solid
because
C.
it's rock solid C, and it's only even that because, and again, that's when you add in our knowledge, is because they're pulling from things that are much better, but it doesn't deliver on the punchline or the emotional tour de force that those other things did. So it's like, that's why it's like Superman 2 light, but not quite. It's like even lighter than light. They don't even get the most emotional angles worked in at all. It just kind of feels like another average Superman adventure. Yeah. And yes, so that's just critiquing what's there. But I also think, Joshua, it is, while I don't think it's fair to critique something that doesn't exist, I don't think that's fair. I do think it's fair to say, well, this is a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think you want to spend too much time in that headspace, because you could write a million different versions of how it went, and you probably like all of them because they're your ideas or some,
I don't need to be attacked by these facts, sir.
No, not you specifically. As viewers, we can watch it and headcanon things all the time. So I have examples, but I'm not going to bring them up because I don't want to start fights. So I just
long-time listeners have already figured out which ones he's talking about.
But I think it's okay to acknowledge this is just a missed opportunity. They could have done a lot more with this. I think that's a fair criticism. What I don't think is okay is if you're like, why didn't they do X, Y, Z, and say that that's the fault of the existing story? So I think, it's just, this story could have been a lot more. I just feel like no matter how you spin it, this lacks ethos. There's no real emotional core to it. It just feels like Superman's like, I found a Kryptonian. Yay, Kryptonian. Oh, bad Kryptonian. We got to put her back in the Phantom Zone, and we're done. All right, cool.
You're right about this. The ethos is a great pull because this feels like a pair of episodes that should have something to say, and it winds up not saying very much at all.
Right. Other than Krypton, pretty crazy place. World's better without it. Not necessarily wrong, but there's nothing really supporting that in a way that I think is meaningful. So yeah, I feel like I'm talking in circles at this point.
No,
but,
it's because we want it to be more. Okay, so let's put that aside and talk about a couple of things that I know you and I both really appreciated. How about this facelift on the Fortress of Solitude, huh?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Things I like about this episode, now that we've just bashed the heck out of this thing. Okay. Yes, Fortress of Solitude looks like it is morphing into the Fortress of Solitude of our dreams.
Yes.
This is Superman's home away from home. It's got kind of like the zoology thing going on that we talked about before. He's got all this technology he's gathering from various places, whether it's the ship, whether it's Brainiac's ship. He's actually combining technologies, and it's like, oh wow, this is really like turning to a place he can go to get away and recharge and get information he needs. That's awesome. And I actually do like that they added the element of the Phantom Zone, because it feels like they're adding in more classic Superman elements that we like.
Absolutely.
Even if I feel like they greatly mishandled the Phantom Zone execution, I'm glad it's here. I think it's pretty neat.
It's a really great source of Krypton-related problems, right? That's what I mean by treating Krypton as this sort of fairy tale past age of wonders and dangers, right? Like you just stumble on something and it's like, is this going to be really cool, like Superman? Or is it going to be really terrible, like almost everything else? I think my favorite part of the Fortress facelift is that Dr. Hamilton is the one that names it. That makes me so happy. It makes me think that Dr. Hamilton is the kind of guy who became a scientist because he was a kid who read a bunch of science fiction novels and said, I'm going to push 100%. The envelope like this. And I just really like it. I've always felt like the Fortress of Solitude was not a thing that Superman would name the fortress himself unless he built it when he was literally a teenager. Like when he was literally looking for a place that he could just go away, that even his parents couldn't find, the thing that all teenagers want to do, right? And that he was going through, sort of a very emo phase when he was like, and this is my Fortress of Solitude. Otherwise, I'm like, where does that name come from? And they nailed it here. I love it. I also love Superman's skepticism with the name when it's first mentioned and his acceptance by the end. That stuff is so good.
I just have to say, piggybacking off of that, Joshua, Dr. Hamilton's the best part of this episode. I'll say it right
great.
now. He's definitely the sci-fi nerd who names the Fortress of Solitude. That's great. I also like how he is also just one of those scientists whose curiosity kills him pretty much every time.
Yes,
he's like,
every time.
I found he's like, hey, Superman, I was digging around and found this thing in here. What if we just turned it on and turned the knob? And hey, look, there's people here screaming to let them out. Should we do it? Yeah, let's fire it off to see what happens. All right. Oh, hey, there's a giant creature that's gonna kill us. I love it. I love the curiosity. I think it's a great source of comedic relief, and I also think that it's true to that character. And yeah, I love that they continue to invest in Emil Hamilton as a viable supporting character in this universe because he's great.
He is literally prying a secret compartment open with a crowbar when Superman walks in, and I'm just like, what? And then he proceeds to just start hitting buttons on the Phantom Zone projector. I would honestly like to see more of this Dr. Hamilton, right? Like I'm just filling in all this headcanon where he's been this like super calm, staid scientist at Star Labs. But then when he gets confronted with all this Superman stuff, he just can't contain himself. I just love it.
He's like a kid in the candy store. This is what he dreams of. This is a scientist's dreams. He's studied this his whole life, and all of a sudden it's like discoveries on discoveries just raining on top of him. And he's like, which one do I get to play with next? It's perfect. And it's true to character. And really, again, I think represents in a lot of ways the bond that humanity is forging with Superman throughout the series.
All right, Caleb, I feel like you've probably tipped your hand a little bit here, but if people, we don't understand why, but if they really enjoyed this episode, or if they found themselves enjoying parts of this episode and being disappointed by other parts, that seems more realistic, right? What alternative media recommendation would you make to them? What should they read, listen to, or experience if they liked bits of this episode? Or God help them if they liked the whole thing.
You know, Joshua, here's the thing. If these people, if listeners out there like it, power to them. I want people to like things. I don't want to be the person going around saying that thing you like is terrible. I might do that sometimes, but it's not out of a place of
it's not
I
personal.
Want to ruin your day. It's not personal. It's not I want to ruin your day. It's just, wow, I just don't see it that way. I'm glad you like it, but I really didn't. And I really didn't like it, and I actually struggle with alternate media recommendations largely because I didn't like it so much, because it just feels like it's Superman 2, except for, like I said, Superman 2 light, but not even light effectively. Just it's like natural ice or something. You know, you're like, I want to get a drink. So you say, hand me a craft beer, and you hand me a natty ice. I'm gonna be like, what is this? This is kind of like the natty ice version of Superman 2. So go watch Superman 2 because it executes a lot of these ideas much more effectively and is a great movie. And if you can track it down, the Richard Donner cut, which is an alternate cut of the movie, is also great. So check that out. I wish I had more to offer here, but I just, at this point, if people watch the episode and want to see more, I think there's no better place to go than more Superman done better. So, Joshua, how about you?
I wind up in a very similar place, man. Like, before we even talked about our Rex, I was in the same spot. I'm actually going to suggest a Superman story that I've mentioned before, but I'm going to ask you to zero in on one particular chapter of it. I know that I've recommended All-Star Superman before, but there is one particular chapter within that larger story where Superman has to deal with two Kryptonian astronauts that actually found their way to Earth while he was indisposed. So when he shows up, they've already kind of been imposing a new Kryptonian order on Earth, at least to a certain extent. And you really get to see the altercation of ideals between these two, for lack of a better phrase, pure, like culturally pure Kryptonians. They are from before Krypton was destroyed and have had no reason to alter their views about the universe since then. And they are confronted with a kinsman that they do not understand and think less of because of all of the reasons that we think Superman is great. So I'm once again going to recommend All-Star Superman, but I'm going to ask that you really pay attention to the chapter that deals with his interactions with those two Kryptonian astronauts, because I think much like you're talking with Superman 2, it does the emotional beats of this story so much better and ends on a much more hopeful note. That about wraps it up for this animated discussion. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to join in, come find us on Twitter. Caleb is at CMastersTalk and I'm at Joshua Unruh, and the hashtag is animated discussion. Caleb, where else can people find you?
I'm the editor-in-chief and contributor at the Cinematropolis, a website that specializes in in-depth film critique and analysis. We publish essays on all types of movies out there. You can also find our podcast, The Cinematic Schematic. All of it can be found at thecinematropolis.com, or if you're checking out the podcast, wherever your podcasts are found.
Remember that An Animated Discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. Show your support by pledging at Patreon or by leaving a great review on Apple Podcasts to make it easier for more people to find us and join in the discussion.
And of course, the links to Patreon, Apple Podcasts, our recommendations, and Twitter are all easy to find in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us for this animated discussion. We'll be back next time to talk about Over the Edge, the episode of the new Batman Adventures.
Until next time, look! Up in the sky! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's an animated discussion!